In any type of super flex league, having two good quarterbacks or producing quarterbacks that you can rely on is probably one of the strongest edges that you can have. In this video, we're going to talk about some of my favorite value quarterbacks that you should be trying to trade for now. We're going to talk about the first guy now on this list. It's going to be Trevor Lawrence. So Trevor Lawrence is somebody who he's more than just a man with incredible hair, guys. He is actually a really good quarterback. Let me give you the case as to why. So, he is still only 25 years old. So I think starting the story there, starting the framing of Trevor Lawrence with the fact that he's still so young, I think is the key to why he's, in my opinion, a huge buy low, right? So he was a generational player coming out of college. He was a prospect. He went number one overall. They said he's the best prospect that we've seen since, I don't know, Andrew Luck. Everyone, they always name a different generational QB, but he really was, right? He was a huge college producer, fantastically talented player. He can run the ball, he gets rushing touchdowns, he can sling it. So, why is he a value, right? Because he's been pretty bad up until now. So, Liam Cohen is now going to be the head coach for the Jaguars. And if anybody knows, Liam Cohen was the old head coach for the Buccaneers, right? So, Baker Mayfield was the QB3 with Liam Cohen under him. So, that's fantastic, right? That means good news. If he can make Baker Mayfield also an ex number one overall pick, and he turned him into a fantasy stud, right? He was an absolute monster in fantasy football. I think we should be excited about that. He brings a type of offense that is just perfect for fantasy production for all players, right? The quarterback, the running back, the wide receivers. So why is this extra special? Because Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter are now going to be the core targets for Trevor Lawrence. So that's going to turn him, in my opinion, into a budget Dollar Tree Joe Burrow, right? Because Joe Burrow, we know him as a rookie. He comes in, he's highly touted, strong draft pick, has only T. Higgins in his first year, gets injured, right? He tears his ACL. I don't even know if he had T. Higgins actually in his first year. He might have still only had like Tyler Boyd. But anyway, once he gets T. Higgins, once he gets Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow turns into a perennial, top pocket passing quarterback, right? Joe Burrow doesn't really give us much on the ground, but as a pocket passer, there's no one else that you might want right now in the NFL. So Brian Thomas Jr., Travis Hunter, those are going to be the dudes that he's going to have for the next 5+ years, right? So that's why I think he's a huge dynasty buy. So in redraft, that also makes him a value pick, right? Because he's going outside the top 15. But anyway, we're going to talk about dynasty here. So we're going to talk about 2022. So in 2022, which was his sophomore season, he was a QB8. So quarterback 8 total finish. He threw for 4K yards, 25 touchdowns. He ran for another 291 yards and had 5 rushing touchdowns. So Trevor Lawrence ended the season, on a good note. They weren't a really good team. So he had Zay Jones, Christian Kirk, and Evan Ingram. And he was still QB8. So I think, as I mentioned, in his healthy seasons, he does have some rushing upside or some rushing floor, right? So he had 5, 4, and 3 touchdowns in the healthy seasons that he played, about 300 yards rushing. So he gives you a nice little floor of like, what is that, 3 or 4 fantasy points per week in terms of rushing production. So if you average it out, right? So that's why I think he's great. I think the Jags, they were 20th in pass attempts last season. He only played, 10 games, right? He only played 10 games. He got injured in the 10th game, so he only played about 9 games. And he was kind of bad, right? The Jags were just a bad team. They weren't a very good team. Their starting wide receiver was a combination of Christian Kirk and I think, yeah, Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram were kind of the only two like targets that he really had. So with that in mind, we want to see his passing attempts go up. We want to see Liam Cohen, unlock this offense. I think he's going to be, he's still supremely talented. If you watch tape of Trevor Lawrence, the man can just sling the ball, dude. He can throw the ball anywhere on the pitch, on the field. So let's talk about trades, right? So what can you actually trade for Trevor Lawrence now? So I think he's severely undervalued, especially in any type of superflex format. I mean, we're talking about superflex here, right? In a single quarterback type of format, you're really not going to trade for quarterbacks unless you're going to like downgrade, and you might have to give up some, or to acquire like a wide receiver. Maybe you downgrade from like an elite guy to like a above average. But for the most part, he's not necessarily somebody I'd be targeting in single format. It's just there's always going to be value outside of the top guys. So this is a trade that I saw. We're going to start with this one. It's DeAndre Swift and James Cook for Trevor Lawrence. So DeAndre Swift has maybe 6 games of relevance left in the tank. I think he's going to get, supplanted this season. If they might even bring in like a Nick Chubb or a J.K. Dobbins to supplant him from day one. But whoever is there, I think will probably take over the backfield by, midseason. DeAndre Swift will probably be relegated to like a receiving option. And then James Cook, same type of idea. He's been on an ascension since his rookie season, and I think he hit his ceiling last season. He had like 50% of all rushing attempts within the red zone, right? So he had a huge touchdown season. But for Trevor Lawrence, who's going to give us potentially 8 to 10 more seasons of super flex quarterback production with Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas Jr. as his wide receivers, I think you give up those running backs, right? Running backs have a very short shelf life, so I love that trade. Here's another trade. It's the 112 in 2025 for Trevor Lawrence. So at the 112, if you're lucky, if you're really lucky, you can get like a Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland, maybe maybe if you're lucky, like an Emeka Egbuka falls to that slot. But for the most part, you're going to get kind of your slightly risky first round picks right at that 112 spot. You can get maybe a Luther Burden at that pick who, is going to be great, but is he going to be a producer? Right? We've seen a lot of wide receivers end up being nothing, right? Think about Quentin Johnston, who was like the number 2 guy a couple seasons ago, and he's almost nothing right now. So you take the surefire thing. He's got the draft capital. He's got the talent. If he doesn't succeed in Jacksonville, he'll succeed in the next place, in my opinion. So I'm happy to give up the 112. Here's another trade, a little bit more of a debate. It's the 107 for Trevor Lawrence. So at the 107, I've seen Trevion Henderson fall to the 1-7. I've seen sometimes even Travis Hunter in leagues where they're a little bit sus about whether he's going to be a wide receiver or a cornerback. So you're trading the 1-7 again. Cam Ward's already off the board, right, by the 1-7 in any type of super flex. So you're essentially saying you're going to get, in my opinion, the best quarterback in the draft class at the 1-7. That's how I like to view that. And even then, would you take Trevor Lawrence over a Cam Ward, considering Trevor Lawrence is still only 25 and he's much more proven? We still haven't seen Cam Ward. So I think Trevor Lawrence is a steal, is absolute value. He's somebody that I'd be targeting for sure in most of my Dynasty Superflex leagues. I just think he's so undervalued at the moment. That's why I love him so much. So the next player on my list, we're going to talk about Anthony Richardson. Now, Anthony Richardson is a big Dynasty buy right now. He's a little bit riskier, in my opinion, just because we don't know how many years he has, right? How much more of a leash do the Colts have for a guy like Richardson? Now, there's some things to be excited about, some things that we can potentially be optimistic about. So, Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is probably the best news for Richardson, right? I think his job is pretty safe. He doesn't have like a bona fide proven dude behind him who's going to like threaten him. He doesn't have like a Joe Flacco type dude, which is fucking hilarious, right? That Joe Flacco is actually like a threat to any QB, but Joe Flacco's still slinging it, man. So I think Anthony Richardson is a tough buy, but I would still buy him because he's got some diabolically bad throws last season, bro. He's got some of the worst throws I've seen a quarterback make. Keep in mind that he's only been a quarterback for like a couple of years. Anthony Richardson's a very late bloomer. He's only been like a real quarterback for like 2 full seasons before he entered the NFL. So I think he's fantasy gold when he plays, though. It doesn't matter if he's a bad thrower, if he can't throw the ball. He is fantasy gold. He's everything we want in a fantasy quarterback, as like your quarterback 2, right? Maybe you want a more solid, solidified starter like a Joe Burrow. Anthony Richardson's the perfect superflex QB, right? Your second quarterback, because he actually has the second best throw of the season as well. So although he has some diabolically shitty throws, he also has the second rated best throw. I don't know who judged it, but it was on like NFL Network, and it was like a deep shot to fucking Alec Pierce, I think. Absolutely phenomenal from his like back foot, slings it like 60 yards, just insane, right? And Anthony Richardson, as I mentioned, he's fantasy gold, bro. So in 12 full games that he started, 5 of them he was a top 5 QB. So 5 out of 12, he's a top 5 QB. 7 of them he's in the top 15. So he either absolutely pops off for you and gets like 25 plus fantasy points. Sometimes he even hits like the 30s. Or he'll get like a 14, 13 point fantasy game. But he has a pretty safe floor, bro, because he's getting that rushing production, right? There are games where he throws like 7 balls. He has like 7 pass attempts. But he still gets like 20 fantasy points because he runs for like another 90 and a touchdown. So Anthony Richardson, he's very safe. I think his job is safe. I think Supposedly, based on some reports I've been seeing, he's been really working on his game. He's been really working on his throwing, and he's been really trying to become more consistent. And he has, yeah, I think he has to prove something, right? He has to kind of make some strides. This is his last chance, so let's see what he can do. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt for one season. And if you have to, even if you have to trade, like let's look at a couple of his trades actually. 7 days ago, we had the 209 for Anthony Richardson. I mean, the 209. What are you getting at that point? You're getting like a Bashal Tootin. You're getting like maybe a Kyle Williams. I would give those guys up for a guy like Anthony Richardson in a super flex league because you're going to get potentially a league-winning quarterback at a Richardson, and if he can prove himself, and if he can be a winning quarterback, if he can bring the Colts to like a winning record this season, they probably stick with him, right? They spent a lot of draft capital on him. He's still a fantasy producer. He's still dynamic. He still makes the defenses have to really guess what he's doing, and he throws a good deep ball. So I think the 209, which is like unproven type of assets for a guy like Anthony Richardson, I would take that. Here's another one, round 2 2026 pick for Anthony Richardson. Same type of idea right now. This could bite you in the ass because it could be an early pick. Ideally, you try to trade it to a team that has kind of a shoddy roster. They're kind of more in like a rebuild. That way you can hopefully turn that into a late second round pick, right? But you just never know. You just never know what these picks are going to end up being. So that's kind of a little bit more of a risky one. And here's another pick that I think is interesting, maybe worth debate. And it's Tua Tagovailoa and a 2025 third, the 302 for Anthony Richardson. So I like that. I like Tua. I like Mike McDaniel. I like the Miami Dolphins, or I like what they used to be. The current iteration of the Miami Dolphins are just short passes and running the ball. They don't really throw deep. Teams don't really let them throw deep. So I think you're giving up a guy like Tua who really has no rushing upside, no rushing utility. For a dude like Richardson that, as I mentioned, could be a league winner, I think you take that shot. I think you buy the upside. You're not really giving up too much with Tua. You're only giving up a 302, right? Again, third and fourth round picks in Dynasty usually end up being nothing. Sometimes they can hit if you're like if you're a sharp and you just know to draft mostly running backs in those rounds. But a lot of people don't, right? A lot of people just draft whoever the fuck they want. But that's Anthony Richardson. I would be going out to buy him right now. I think he can get him for almost nothing. And the next player is going to be Bryce Young. So Bryce Young is actually not as cheap as he used to be. So I was trying to buy Bryce Young all offseason last season because he was absolutely in the toilet. His draft capital, his value, everything tanked after that first season. He just did not look good. It looked like all his flaws of being undersized were kind of being highlighted with Bryce Young. So that was slightly concerning, and that's why I was trying to buy him last season. I was like, let's see what happens, right? I can get him for almost nothing. Unfortunately, nobody was really selling him, but this is his profile. So he was former number 1 overall pick. Notoriously, C.J. Stroud went right after him. C.J. Stroud had an amazing rookie season. Bryce Young was shit, right? He was dog water in his first season. Now, sophomore season, it's year 2. C.J. Stroud turns into the dog shit, right? He devolves into a bag of shit while Bryce Young fucking ascends, dude. He becomes a fantastic quarterback, especially the second half of the season. We'll get to that in a minute. So the Panthers are dead set on building around Bryce Young. So they go and they draft Ted McMillan with high draft capital, second wide receiver off the board. They signed Rico Dowdle, who, to be honest, is actually a pretty solid running back. I would put him like in the Chuba Hubbard realm. They're both like pretty decent. Chuba Hubbard has more of a 3-down skill set, while Rico, I would consider him more of like a between the tackles guy, but he steps in to take over the Miles Sanders role. So you have two solid running backs that are both proven, can both produce. You have Adam Thielen, who, although he's old, is actually like a fantastic option for Bryce Young. They actually have crazy chemistry with each other. He's basically, as I mentioned, like, budget fucking Cooper Kupp over here. Xavier Legette, exciting, fast, great after the catch, but, kind of inconsistent. Ted McMillan, as I mentioned, and they actually go to the nearest Home Depot or Office Depot, and they find Hunter Renfrow, dude. They pick up Hunter Renfrow. They sign him to like a vet minimum, a really cheap contract. And let's not forget, dude, Hunter Renfrow was actually the also budget Cooper Kupp, dude. So Hunter Renfrow was running routes that other players were then stealing. I don't know if you guys remember. Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson both got high praise for a route that they did where they caught a touchdown on like a short, it was like an inside and then out type of route. That shit originates from Hunter Renfrow. So the man can run routes. If Thielen were to go down, Hunter Renfrow steps in as a solid slot player, solid safety valve for him. So I think Bryce Young has a lot. We have a lot to be happy about. I mean, fuck, dude. As I mentioned, all those names, fucking Rico Dowdle, Adam Thielen, Hunter Renfrow. Maybe it's a little shittier saying that shit out loud. Maybe we shouldn't be too excited, but I think it's just like some solid pieces around him. I think we can be a little bit excited. Now, why should we actually be excited? So, aside from all the players around him, let's talk about Bryce Young himself. So, the sack total went from 62 in 2023, so very high. He was getting sacked fucking multiple times a game, many times a game, to 29 in 2024. So the offensive line fucking improved. They made improvements to the O line. They bring back the entire O line. So the whole O line that was really good last season's back. They actually signed some depth behind some of those pieces. So we like to see that, right? And as I mentioned, dude, so from weeks 8 to 18, Bryce Young averaged 21.2 fantasy points per game. So he had a fantastic close to the season. If you guys see this QB PFF pass grade and big time throw rate, this chart that I found on Twitter, I think Ian Harditz, I believe, shared it. He is up there with the likes of Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, and Joe Burrow. He actually had a higher big time throw rate, so close, 7.8% big time throw rate, something in that realm. Those other guys had a higher PFF pass grade on those big time throws, but he was launching, dude. He was slinging him more than any of these other guys. And I think we should be excited, man. So let's talk about some potential trades that you can throw out there that we've seen in the last couple days. This comes from Dynasty Daddy, by the way. Probably should have mentioned that for some of the other guys. So Puka Nacua, this one's gonna be spicy, dude. People are gonna be debating me on this. Puka Nacua for George Pickens and Bryce Young. So I'm taking the Bryce Young, George Pickens side. Let me explain why. I know Puka Nacua is like the third or fourth dynasty wide receiver by rank at the moment, but I think we're overbuying or we're overhyping Puka. And here's why. Puka Nacua is going to be probably be great. All his measurables, his targets per route run, yards per route run, first downs per route run, amazing. Or first downs per target, amazing. Puka Nacua is an absolutely fantastic. He's probably going to produce like the wide receiver 3 in Dynasty, probably like most likely. Now, here are the couple of things why I think that he won't, or why his value should be a little bit lower. You add Devontae Adams, who, in his introduction to the team, they showed Devontae Adams' game film. They showed tape to the whole team. Kind of cringe, kind of like gassing up your boy in front of a chick, dude, trying to wingman your chick. But they show tape of Devontae Adams. Dude, Devontae Adams is going to impact Puka Nacua. I know nobody likes to believe that. They think there's enough to go around, but we saw last season when Puka Nacua was in his, alpha role, there was nothing for Cooper Kupp. Nothing. He was literally an offensive lineman. He was a tight end out there blocking on every play. So what does Devontae Adams do to Puka? Does Devontae Adams become just an inline blocker like Cooper? Fuck no, dude. He's going to get his 110 targets on the season. So he also said he's going to retire by age 30. And Puka Nacua is already, 26? 25 or 26? So listen, you got maybe one more season of Matt Stafford. And the third reason is Matt Stafford, dude. I'm a Rams fan. Trust me, bro, when I say this. Cooper Kupp, Calvin Johnson, Puka Nacua, Robert Woods, all these guys are great players, especially Calvin Johnson. He probably one of the best wide receivers ever. But Matthew Stafford is an X factor. Matthew Stafford is a common denominator between these triple crown wide receivers, right? These treble wide receivers and these. I'm sorry, but Puka Nacua with a fucking, with an Anthony Richardson is nothing. He's nothing. He's not even startable. Matthew Stafford is Himothy. He's him. He is the reason that all these guys have been able to produce at their ceilings. I'm not saying that they wouldn't be able to produce without him, but he is him, dude. Matthew Stafford is one of the most underrated, best quarterbacks of all time. I don't give a fuck what anyone says. The dude gets praised by other quarterbacks, other coaches. Matthew Stafford, dude, is him. So we're lingering on this a little bit too much, but I would make that trade. You also get George Pickens thrown into the deal, who, he's not nothing. I think he can produce for us for the next couple of seasons, just to make up for the loss of Puka. I think George Pickens is a nice little add in there. And then let's talk about now this next trade. It's the 112 and the 312 for Bryce Young. Again, as I mentioned, the 112, you're getting one of those tight ends, right? You're getting, like, maybe, if you're lucky, like who are you getting at the end? Fucking Luther Burden, right, at the end of the first round. So there's some value. There's some dudes who could be really good, but again, you're getting a quarterback, bro, in a super flex league who's very young and has shown a lot of improvement. I think you just have to make that trade. Like if Bryce Young was going in this draft, would he make it to the 112 in a super flex? Probably not, right? He'd be drafted like at the 1-4, at the 1-5. So I make that trade, and then you're giving up the 312 with that. That's really also not much. End of the third round pick. What are you getting? You're just getting dart throws at that point. Next trade is going to be Jalen Waddle and a 2027 fourth round. So you can basically just throw the fourth round pick in the trash. You're trading Jalen Waddle, who's also 26, also stuck behind Tyreek Hill for at least another season, maybe two, for a super flex quarterback, right? Again, would you trade Jalen Waddle for the 1-4? I think you would. So those are the three quarterbacks that I think are huge values for you guys, man. I think you should be going out and trying to buy these guys. If you like this video, if you like any of these picks, I'd love to hear what you think. Hit me with a like, man. I would really appreciate it, dude. It would super help the channel. And if you're new here, subscribe, hit that bell. You can catch my content. I'm gonna be, pushing more content. Try to be consistent. Try to do it daily as the off season goes on. We're gonna then transition into redraft content, probably around June, July. I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, I'll catch you guys in the next one.